Hello, my name is Amanda Lee Alonzo, and my project and research has been on mass incarceration within the United States of America. So an overview, mass incarceration is the dramatic increase in the rate of Americans who are incarcerated. Currently, over 2.3 million Americans are held in incarceration, whether in jails or prisons. Our criminal justice system targets minorities, especially those who are in poverty. There is a highly disproportionate amount of Black and brown Americans who are held in incarceration when compared to white Americans. Additionally, our criminal justice system does not properly distribute justice to criminals or their victims. In a study, it was shown that over 70% of survivors or victims of violent crime actually prefer alternatives such as community service or rehabilitation or counseling instead of prisons. Many of these people cited that they felt that rehabilitation encouraged the prevention of crime rather than sentencing a criminal to jail and then re-releasing them back into the public with little to no changes. Some current issues within our criminal justice system. As I've stated, there is a huge focus on punishment. So instead of fixing the issues that cause crime, such as poverty or child abuse or substance abuse, our criminal justice system instead likes to place people in prison for some time and then just releasing them back into the public. Additionally, there is a huge sway of the financial status of a defendant. So when they go to trial, it has been proven that many of those who are impoverished end up in prison when compared to those who have money. This is due especially to the fact that those who are impoverished have little resources to afford a private attorney rather than having to use a free public defender who has a much higher caseload. Additionally, there's a huge lack of mental care within our prisons. Research has shown that there are things like child abuse and poverty and substance abuse that are all risk factors for criminal behavior. And the care available in prisons is not substantial, especially due to the lack of available professionals. Overall, there are just not enough social systems in place to assist people. Some current solutions to crime within the United States. So the tough on crime approach has been used a lot, especially since the 1970s. This is exemplified by the much harsher punishments and much harsher sentencing that has been set in place. This is shown in things like the 3 strikes laws and mandatory minimum laws. Additionally, cash bail is a huge issue, especially when it comes to the sway of financial status of defendants. So, tough on crime is exemplified by 3 strikes laws. So this drastically increases the sentence of an individual upon their third offense. It has been shown that this targets mainly non-violent offenders like drug addicts, and it is incredibly ineffective in keeping violent criminals away from the public. But it does serve to increase the amount of people who are held in confinement and further exacerbates the dilemma of mass incarceration. Additionally, mandatory minimums add to mass incarceration. These are mandatory punishments that are decided by Congress. So judges cannot give lower sentences than those that are imposed by Congress. Judges cannot take into account any other factors when looking at a defendant. They cannot take into account mental status. They cannot take into account substance abuse or child abuse. This actually removes checks and balances from within the court system because the judge is not the one who decides the sentence in this case. It is Congress. So, as I've said, cash bail is a huge issue. This keeps impoverished defendants in jail prior to trial, and as seen in the graph, most people in prison are poor, and the poorest are women and people of color. As shown, the annual income pre-incarceration of those who are incarcerated is much lower than the average income of those who are not incarcerated at all. So additionally, this encourages plea bargaining. So plea bargaining is when a defendant pleads guilty in exchange for not having to go to trial. So often this will keep the person out of jail, but it will give them a criminal record. And this also creates lasting issues. So with a criminal record, a person will find it much more difficult to find housing, to find a job, and to receive government assistance. So the proposal here is to eliminate the 3 strikes laws and mandatory minimum laws, to eliminate cash bail, to implement more efficient social programs, and to focus on rehabilitation. Overall, the goal of this is to drastically decrease the amount of people who are incarcerated within the United States. So, benefits of the proposition. Steps to be taken. First, we need to gain political support for changes in legislation. It's been shown in places like Washington and D.C. and New Jersey, who both got rid of cash bail, that cash bail actually does not increase the amount of people who show up to trial. Instead, when looking at risk factors and determining how likely a person is to show up for their trial, New Jersey and Washington, D.C. were able to keep the numbers of the people who show up to trial from the cash bail system, but it decreases incarceration rates. Number 2 is to determine alternate sentencing. So instead of sending a person directly to jail for a crime, this would instead have them focus on rehabilitation. It would give them counseling, and it would cause them to do community service. So step 3 here would be to implement more community service programs. As seen in the picture, these are inmates in 2019 who were fighting fires. So this is one community service program that is available in California. Additionally, step 4 is to implement more counseling and public assistance programs. As I've stated, mental health and substance abuse and poverty are some of the highest factors when it comes to incarceration and criminal behavior. So when implementing counseling and public assistance programs, we are able to decrease the amount of crimes that take place in the first place. So some benefits of this proposition is it reaches our goal. We decrease the amount of people who are held in incarceration in the first place. Additionally, when we end the cash bail system, this decreases the amount of people with criminal records because we are decreasing the amount of plea bargainings that are necessary. We also decrease the likelihood of recidivism, which is when a person goes into prison, gets back out, and then returns to prison for the same crime. Additionally, this encourages finding solutions to social problems in the first place, rather than just slapping a band-aid of placing a person in prison and then having them released. So the feasibility, as I've said, there's a lot of research on this. Places like Washington, D.C. and New Jersey have both ended the cash bail system and have proven its effectiveness. As seen in the graph, we spend a lot of money on our prison system every year. Places like prison, jails, parole, and probation take about $80.7 billion every year. And the annual total is $182 billion. It would be incredibly easy to funnel some of this money into public assistance programs and counseling, which would actually lend more positive effects to the community, as it would increase the positive effects of inmates instead of just placing them in prison where they have no effect on the community at all. As I've said, there has already been proven effectiveness of this. So it is necessary to be aware of lawful discrimination and social issues, as these are some of the factors that lead to mass incarceration in the first place, because these are issues that lead to crime in the first place. Additionally, social programs would decrease the amount of crimes that take place, which would decrease the amount of people who are in incarceration. Additionally, supportive legislation changes like the ending of mandatory minimums, 3 strikes laws, and cash bail would all also decrease the amount of people who are held in incarceration. And here are resources.